friends, and welcome to the video. I'm Olivia, and if you've never seen my face before, you can consider me your fragrance fairy godmother. So spring is upon us, and that means wedding season is upon us. So if you are a bride-to-be, I have some fragrances for you today that I think would make the most beautiful bridal fragrances of all time. So if you're a bride-to-be, or you just want to pretend that you're a princess, that's totally fine too, but you're in the right place. So grab yourself a snack, sit down, and let's get started with the video. Starting off with Blanc Vert by Liquid Imaginaire. This would make an incredible wedding fragrance because this screams white. Now this is a sweet and creamy, super milky lactonic floral fragrance. There's almost something that comes off a little bit coconutty in this one, but there is a really strong dose of white florals, mainly tuberose, which to me gives it this robust, feminine, super strong floral, and it has a little bit of powderiness in the base. It is sweet, it is delicious, it's long lasting. I don't smell it on the streets very frequently. You won't be reminded of your wedding every place you turn, because if you wear Baccarat Rouge 540, no shade to that fragrance, you will smell that everywhere. And you want to be able to preserve the memories of your wedding, and if you smell the fragrance that you wore everywhere, it will kind of convolute the memories in your mind. Does that make sense? But if you're not into the florals, we'll go for something a little bit more fruity, so we're going with Leonora by Mind Games. This is a super juicy and delicious passion fruit and apricot scent. But this is not your run-of-the-mill fruity floral sort of fragrance. This starts off a little bit spicy and a little bit zippy with some ginger, and you get a lot of roasted warmth, almost an almondy quality coming from some tonka bean. There's a creamy and dreamy sandalwood and musk in the base. This is tart and fruity and juicy and sweet, but it dries down a little bit woody, a little bit musky, and a little bit warm, and it lasts for a very long time in comparison to a lot of fruity florals. So if you typically only dabble in designer fragrances and you want something super special and a little bit more unique for your wedding, this would be the choice. But what if you're more into something that's fresh and dewy and green and will really smell one with nature in the springtime? We're going with Petite Sheree by Goutal. So when this opens up, you are going to be hit with a blast of juicy green pear that smells natural. It does not smell candied or synthetic. And imagine that you're eating this pear in a lush green garden. You can smell the fresh grass along with lilac trees. Lilac is a super versatile floral because it will add a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of powderiness, but also still has a little bit of a green, fresh edge to it, so it doesn't feel quite as heavy as jasmine or rose. Perfect for those of you who want to feel like a fairy. You want to feel soft and delicate and feminine, and you don't want something that's overpowering, but rather something that feels fresh and natural. But let's say that you're more into the clean girl aesthetic, but you want something that has that oomph for your wedding day. We're going with Vala by Perfumes de Marly. I cannot speak highly enough of this fragrance. I am in love with this fragrance. It is citrusy, it is musky, it does have a little bit of floral in there. I want you to imagine, now just go with me for a second because I know a lot of you are gonna give me the side eye, but this reminds me of the super niche, super elevated version of Light Blue by Dolce & Gabbana. Now before you start slandering, you know that we were all wearing that back in the day. Don't even look at me like that. But this has a note of white peach that gives it this juicy quality, along with the citrus that actually stays throughout the wear of the entirety of the fragrance, which is very difficult to do in fragrances because citrus dissipates very quickly. And then when it dries down, you are left with the most beautiful, sparkling musk. And there's something about this in the dry down that is kind of reminiscent of Another 13 by Le Labo, but a much more feminine version. It's citrusy and mouthwatering and fresh, a little bit sweet and nice and musky on the dry down. This right here, ugh. Now for those of you who are typically into something sweet, a little bit more gourmand leaning, we are going with Silk Santal by Kayali. Now of course this is from the wedding collection, so you knew that I had to include this one, but honestly out of all of the Kayalis, this is definitely within my top 3. This is also a musky fragrance, but this is going to lean on the significantly more sweet vibe. It starts off with a sparkling champagne, but something very sweet and girly. Think like a rosé. And then you get a note of praline, giving this a little bit of a dessert-esque touch without being too thick or cloying or bothersome. And then as it dries down, you get a vanilla musk, but it feels very sparkling, very sweet. It is just a delicious fragrance. So for those of you who like it sweet, a little bit gourmand, but you want something up there, this one. And for those of you who like something that is clean and soapy and perhaps a little bit vintage, we're going with Berelli by Tiziana Terenzi. Now let me just say, this bad boy right here is a pretty penny. This is $495. But keep in mind, we are talking about fragrances that are reserved specifically for what a lot of people feel is their most special day of their life. This is what I imagine Marilyn Monroe's bathwater would have smelled like. This is clean and soapy and sparkling, coming from some aldehydes, which do give it that slight vintage touch. If you've ever tried Blanche by Byredo, this is like Blanche on steroids. This is the Mac Daddy of all clean girl aesthetic fragrances, but you definitely do have to like that touch of aldehydes, which I personally love. But let's say you can't make up your mind and you don't want to cut the difference between sweet and floral and powdery, you want everything together. And we're going with Love Delight by Amouage. Now this is a brand new release, and this is interesting because in the beginning, you are getting a mandarin and a ginger, so you're getting something that's juicy and tart, a little bit spicy. Then you start to get a little hit of cinnamon, giving it some warmth. And as that fades down, you start to reveal some florals, so you're getting heliotrope that gives it a little bit of powderiness, along with a rose and jasmine. But then in the base is where it starts to get a little bit gourmand. So you have vanilla, and you have a little bit of cacao, but you have a rum, and you guys know I'm a sucker for a rum. It smells like a honey glazed pastry with fresh florals around you that has a little bit of fresh grated ginger on the top. But if you know that you're going to be sipping on some champagne, a little bubbly for your wedding, and you don't want the scent of that to interfere with your fragrance, we're going with Sparkling Joe. Now, oftentimes fragrances will have the note of champagne, but it will come off very candied and very sweet, almost like a sparkling juice. Not this one. This one is a photorealistic, super dry white champagne. So you get quite a bit of effervescence in the beginning, but as it settles down, you do get a little bit of a natural pear. What I like about this one is when it dries down, it turns into the most beautiful second skin musky fragrance because of the note of ambrette. To me, ambrette can have a little bit of a toasted nutty feel meets natural smelling banana, which I know sounds odd, but it all works together very nicely. So it starts off fizzy, bubbly champagne, it gets a little bit sweet with that pear, but as it dries down, turns into a second skin musky scent. It's beautiful. And for those of you who are fans of the fresh scent of neroli, we're going with Eau Feminine. Now, typically, I am not really a fan of neroli or orange blossom all that much, but in this fragrance, I think it's done really well because they have the note of petitgrain, so it's giving it that green quality that smells like orange blossoms that are floating in the breeze in the hot California summer. It's made just a little bit spicy in the beginning with some pink pepper and has a ton of citrus to back it up. And then as it dries down, you get a very classic mix of vanilla, sandalwood, and patchouli. Although this scent is fresh, there's something about it that feels very womanly and has a lot of presence. Some people might find this a little bit mature, but I look at this as very elegant. Now, don't get me wrong, all of these are great fragrances, but I know that some of us are working on a budget, and just because you're working on a budget doesn't mean that you can't smell fabulous on your wedding, so let's talk about a few that are a little bit more budget friendly. Starting with Vanilla Vice by Sniff. Now, this is a vanilla fragrance, but I don't want you to think a straightforward, typical baker's vanilla. There's something that's very airy and woody about this. It also comes off just a little bit spiced, and in the dry down has that beautiful molecular sort of feel that you would get from Baccarat Rouge. It's sweet, but it's warm and cozy, and it's nice and uplifting and airy at the same time. Another good one that I talked about in my Arab fragrance video is Aay Portrait by Latafa. And this would be better in the hotter months of spring going towards summer because this one is going to feel a little bit more tropical. This is a mango fragrance, but it does have quite a bit of florals coming from some jasmine as well as osmanthus that makes it feel a little bit of a honeyed floral. And then in the base, you are getting a muskiness, you're getting a little touch of oud that just serves to make this a little bit more grounded and long lasting and have a little bit more impact than just your regular fruity floral. And for those of you who have a little bit more of a serious personality type, you don't want something that is really sweet and you want something that feels like it's got some power behind it, I would go with Laventure Fem by Al Haramain. I've described this before as a boss babe fragrance, so if you're getting married and you happen to be a CEO, this is your scent right here. It does have a little bit of an androgynous feel, so if you find yourself liking a little bit more masculine fragrances, this kind of sits right between a traditional feminine and masculine. This starts off with the pineapple that is not overly sweet and then dries down with quite a bit of earthiness coming from some oak moss. And for a super duper budget friendly option, we're going with this brand new one from Le Monde Gourmand, and I am going to totally butcher the name, I am sorry. Classe Foutique. Now when people said that Yara by Lattafa smelled like strawberries and cream, I think that they were actually smelling this one because this is through and through a sweet strawberries and cream fragrance. There's also something a little bit powdery about it, so it kind of reminds me of the strawberries and cream lip smackers from back in the day. Do you remember those? And I think that this would be best suited for a bride that is maybe a little bit younger or super girly and pink and feminine. And lastly, we're going with Irresistible by Givenchy. While I understand that a lot of people feel like this is slightly a basic fragrance, this is so effective and is one of the most used fragrances in my collection. It's a sweet and juicy pear, a soft and delicate pink rose, and dries down to have a beautiful musk. It's pillowy soft, it's ethereal, it's feminine, and it's the perfect amount of sweetness without feeling overbearing. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you're a bride-to-be, congratulations, and I hope that your big day is as great as you imagine and then some, and I hope that your in-laws are cool and that you love them. And I'll be back next Saturday, 10 a.m. PST. Be there or be square. And until next Saturday, take care of yourselves, my friends.